Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Welcome everyone to our part 2, three-part discussion. This stage 2 days ago was kind of separate theme.
Vítejte všichni na druhém dílu rodinného sezení. Vítejte zpátky do tématu toho, co budu následovat dnes a zítra.
But it was also kind of introduction, kind of priming the pump, prime the pump. In India, they have these hand pumps. And if you don't use a hand pump for a while, then if you want it to work, you have to first get water from some other pump, some other source, and pour it into the pump. That's called priming the pump.
Takže minulé téma bylo takovým úvodem na to celé úsloví v angličtině nastartování použití, když se delší dobu Indii pumpa nepoužívá, tak aby zase mohla správně fungovat, musí se dnes trochu zvětší, nalít. Musím to rozstříkat.
Let's see, who was here 2 days ago?
Tady byl na té minulé seance.
So our theme on that first page was education, not indoctrination.
Takže pro ty, kdo jste tady nebyli ten první den, tak naše téma bylo vzdělávání, ne indoktrinace.
And the subtitle was something like developing a culture in this kind of independent thoughtfulness.
A podtitulek byl smysl rozvíjení kultury samostatného přemýšlení v ISKCONu.
And we explored the idea of indoctrination as opposed to education.
Teď jsme srovnávali indoktrinaci versus vzdělávání.
And I said this is a somewhat artificial dichotomy. It's not black and white.
Říkal jsem, že je to trošku umělé rozlišení, že to není úplně černobílé.
But it helps us to think about what it is we're actually aiming for when we think about education, devotional education.
Takže nám to pomáhá zamyslet se nad tím, o co se nám vlastně jedná, čeho chceme dosáhnout v rámci našeho vzdělávání.
And to sort of sharpen the contrast, I contrasted between an educational culture and or intellectual culture versus intellectual use.
abych ještě zostřil ten kontrast, tak jsem rozlišil intelektuální kulturu od intelektuálního zneužívání.
Now, we may want to say, we may agree that Shastra is the foundation of our culture and Krishna consciousness.
Bychom se chtěli shodnout na tom, že šástra je základem naší kultury ve vědomí Krišny.
And immediately when we say that, different questions come up. What constitutes Shastra?
Jakmile to řekneme, hned se vyrozí nějaké otázky, například, co všechno znamená šástra.
And how do we apply it?
I jak tu šástru budeme uplatňovat.
We can talk about these things today and also tomorrow, ever so briefly. And I'm framing it in this Western term, hermeneutics.
Takže o těchto věcech můžeme mluvit dnes i zítra, i když to bude pořád ještě jenom stručně, a to všechno shrnuji základním pojmem hermeneutika.
Which is a word that sounds a little bit scary because we don't generally use it.
Což je slovo, které může znít trochu strašidelně, protože ho většinou nepoužíváme.
I like to look at the definition of hermeneutics later, but I like to think of it as the art and skill of interpretation.
To slovo ještě budu rozebírat později, ale sám bych to nazval umění, schopnost interpretace.
I explained last time that the idea of interpretation itself may be a problem.
Minule jsem zmínil, že samotná myšlenka interpretace může být problém.
Considering that Srila Prabhupada many times used the word interpretation in a very negative sense.
Když vezmeme v úvahu, že Srila Prabhupada často slovo interpretace vykládal velice negativně.
We'll come to that. We'll discuss different statements Prabhupada made about interpretation.
My se taky dostaneme k různé výroky Srila Prabhupada ohledně interpretace.
But what I want to do in the beginning of this is to, I guess you could say it's still part of priming the pump, is to think about our Shastra and to think of our Shastra in some wider contexts.
Čím chci začít, je něco, co by nepatřilo k tomu startování pumpy, to znamená zabývat se naší šástkou, ale ještě i v širším kontextu.
And what I have to show, I have to apologize, some of the writing is going to be too small to see, but I will try to explain.
Takže omlouvám se, že na těch obrázcích bylo mít příliš malá, ale já se to pokusím vysvětlit.
Okay, hold on to your hats for the first.
Držte si klobouky,
Okay, what's this about?
čím je tohle?
I really like this diagram. It was prepared by one professor, Thomas Hopkins, who had a very sweet appreciation of Srila Prabhupada and his on society. He was a professor in Hinduism, and he wrote a short introduction to Hinduism, and this includes.
Mně se ta tabulka velice líbí, pochází od profesora Thomase Hopkinse, který měl velice sladký vztah a ocenění Krišnu Prabhupada jeho společnosti ISKCONu. A on je profesor hinduismu a to je součást jeho prezentace základy hinduismu.
And with this chart, which looks something like an electrical diagram, he's giving an overview of what present-day Indologists understand about the dating of the different texts.
Ta tabulka, která připomíná takové elektronické schéma, je pochopení současných indologů ohledně kdy vznikaly různé texty.
So I want to show this because devotees sometimes may meet the scholar who is familiar with this, but the devotee is absolutely not. And so what the devotee will insist that the Srimad Bhagavatam is 5,000 years old, and period, that's just the truth. Simple as that.
Proč to ukazujeme, že se může stát pedelník, se setká s nějakým indologem a každý bude mít svou verzi. Ten indolog bude zpívat tím naprosto obeznámený, bude stávět se pro odaného, bude stávět slovo. Bhagavatam vznikl před 5000 lety, tečka, a nic víc nemusíme dodávat.
So don't worry, I'm not going to test you on this.
Nebojte se, nebudu vás toho zkoušet.
But just to get some idea, if you look at the very bottom of this, you'll see the timeline, time going from the left to the right, and it's showing 3 very broad periods of time. To the far left is a period from 1200 BC, that is before the Common Era, to 200 BC.
Ale máme časovou osu, kde jsou 3 taková docela dlouhá období. První je cirka 1200 před naším letopočtem až 200.
And then the next middle section is from 60 to 900 Common Era.
Druhá perioda je od roku 200 před Kristem do 900 našeho letopočtu.
Jo. Teď.
Now it's going to be this side. Okay. Then the section on the right is from 900 of the Common Era to the present.
Napravo máme období od 900 našeho letopočtu až do současnosti.
Going back to the far left and sort of middle from the bottom to the top, you see a little box that says mantra samhitas.
Teď úplně nalevo, zhruba prostřed té stránky máme obdobníček mantra samhity,
which is referring to the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajurveda, and the Atharvaveda.
se stavuje na 4 védy.
So it's suggesting graphically that the dating of these 4 sort of foundational Vedic texts is put around 1200 before the Common Era.
Řečeno, tyto 4 základní védské texty se datují zhruba 1200 před naším letopočtem.
Sometimes they'll say from 1000 back to 1500 before the Common Era, so they'll give a range of about 500 years.
Někdy se mluví o tom, že může být 1000 až 1500 let před Kristem, takže tam je přesah 500 let.
And how they're coming to that is, it's quite complicated how they come to such dating, but it's a process of what we might want to call agreeing that it's a yes.
Se kterým já jsem se setkal, tak souhlasí.
Hear evidence. What do they consider evidence? They would be happy to hear evidence that it is always according to their understanding of what is evidence.
Oni byli rádi, kdyby se jim dostalo důkazů, to, co oni jsou schopni přijmout jako důkaz, že to datum je mnohem starší.
And this is the case for all the literature you see symbolized with these boxes and so forth.
No a to platí nakonec pro všechno, co je s tím spojené, všechny ty další texty.
Just a couple of things further to point out. It's been structured so that on the upper parts are literature related to Shiva and the worship of Shiva, and the lower part is about worship of Vishnu and the worship of Vishnu.
No a když se tím budeme zabývat, tak
and then later on, you'll see Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Badarayana's Vedanta Sutras, like that.
potom do tím prostředkem máme brzké pozdní Upanishady, Kalpa Sutry, Dharma Shastry, a pokračuje to Patanjaliho Yoga Sutra, Vedanta Sutra a tak dále.
And then below that, you'll see late epics, and that's referring to the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, especially.
Pod tím vidíme pozdější eposy, což se zvlášť stavuje na Ramayana a Mahabharatu.
Which Mahabharata has been a huge matter of debate among scholars as far as dating goes.
Co se týče datování Mahabharaty, tak o tom vedou učenci hodně debaty.
It's become somewhat common to say, well, we can date it between 400 before the Common Era and 300 or 400 after the Common Era. So 700 to 800 years for compiling the Mahabharata.
Většinou docházejí k závěru, že se dostavuje na období 400 let před naším letopočtem až 3 nebo 400 let našeho letopočtu, takže celá Mahabharata, že by vznikala po dobu 800 let.
Although one scholar, the late Al-Hilfbachel, argued very much against everyone else. He said it's not unreasonable to take that the Mahabharata was compiled within one generation, and that's considered very radical.
Jeden Indok, který jsem postřeboval nedávno zemřel, který oproti prakticky všem ostatním říkal, že je velice rozumné se domnívat, že Mahabharata byla vytvořena v rámci jedné generace, což je radikální názor.
Other Indologists say, he's crazy.
No, ostatní Indologové říkají, že on je blázen.
But he has his arguments, he writes his books.
Ale on proto má svoje argumenty, napsal svoje knihy.
Notice where the Bhagavata Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a larger square that says late Puranas. Within that is a square that says Bhagavata Purana. Toward the bottom is the center.
A tam vidíme, kam je zařazený Srimad Bhagavatam, období pozdější Purán, Bhagavata Purana.
So the Bhagavata Purana is generally dated somewhere around the 10th century of the Common Era. So about 1,000 years or 1,100, 1,200 years, not 5,000.
Běžně řadí Bhagavata Puránu do období kolem 1000 našeho letopočtu, to znamená 11-12 let zpátky od našich časů. 5000.
But I should say, regarding Puranas in general, scholars will also readily admit that we can only assess written texts, but Purana, it's understood traditionally, is oral text, and there's no way we can date oral text.
Ale zároveň musím dodat, že se shodnou na tom, že takhle můžeme vyhodnocovat jenom to, co je zapsané, ale zároveň se shodnou na tom, že si to předávalo ústně a tam není šance dopátrat nějaký datum vzniku.
Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was aware that scholars were estimating this about.
Bhaktivinoda Thakur si byl vědomý toho, že učenci to vidí takhle, co se týče datování písem.
And in the introduction to his Sri Krishna Samhita, he explores the possibility from a Western historical perspective of determining the date of the Bhagavatam as being possibly 100 years earlier than was estimated.
V úvodu své Krišna Samhita to rozebírá tak, že hodí se zkoumat dobré důvody, abychom zmínili, že Bhagavatam vznikl o 100 let dřív, než vy běžně uznáváte.
But then on the next page he says, in any case, it doesn't matter. The Bhagavatam is eternal.
Na další stránce říká, na tom stejně záleží, protože Bhagavatam je věčný.
And it manifests at different times.
Jenom se projevuje v různých dobách, různými způsoby.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a cold shower to start things off.
Jsem vám na začátek chtěl dát takovou studenou sprchu.
Another way of thinking about the Bhagavatam in terms of relations to other texts.
Další způsob, jak uvažovat o Bhagavatamu, jsou jeho vztahy s jinými texty.
A fancy term that's used in a lot of areas of scholarship, humanities now, is intertextuality.
Učenci a kdo se zabývají srovnáváním literatury, mají proto takové řečení slovo mezitextovost.
Yeah, so I mentioned Tom Hopkins, the scholar before. He did his doctoral dissertation on the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Jsem zmínil Hopkinse, profesora ekonomickou práci právě zaměřil na téma Srimad Bhagavatam.
In 1962.
V roce 1962.
Before Srila Prabhupada went to.
Předtím, než Srila Prabhupada je do Ameriky.
And this is just a side note. He once visited 26 Second Avenue Center in New York with a few, 2 or 3 of his students.
Taková poznámka, že Hopkins navštívil chrám na 2. Avenue 126 s několika svými studenty.
It's this little shop, storefront. So they came in, it was open, they came in, and the devotees had, I guess, a table, and they had Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam, first canto, in the 3 volumes on the table.
Oni tam vešli, bylo otevřeno a žáci Srila Prabhupada tam měli na stolku vystavené ty první 3 díly, první zpěv na Bhagavatam.
And Tom Hopkins was so thrilled. It's amazing. And there was a young devotee in that present, and he got chatting with him. And Professor Hopkins said to the young man, "So, your teacher, your guru, he is from Bengal?" And the young man said, No, he's from India. So Professor Hopkins, he told this story many years later. He said he could understand devotees didn't know a whole lot of geography at the time.
Profesor Hopkins po letech na tuto přírodu vzpomínal a říkal, že pochopil, že odaní moc si nebyli vědomí zeměpisných souvislostí.
I was inspired to think about interrelationship of the Bhagavatam to different texts. One time when I don't remember if I read or heard first. I think I read first. Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture in Los Angeles sometime in 1969.
Mě velice zajímalo právě to srovnávání textů, jako na tom s další literaturou a vzpomínám na, že jsem to poprvé slyšel v přednáška, kterou šlo Prabhupada dával v Los Angeles v roce 1969.
And at the end of his lecture, he invited questions. He had been speaking. And in the transcription, then comes woman, holder. So some lady, unidentified, asks a question.
V přepisu vidíme nějaká žena, není jasné, kdo to přesně byl, pokládá otázku.
And the question was, what about Joan of Arc? Prabhupada, Joan of Arc? Yes. Do you know, she asked, do you know who is Joan of Arc? Prabhupada, yes. So it goes back and forth a couple of times to clarify who she is, who she was, and so on. Yes, she was a saint in France, and she was very, I don't think they use the word devotional, but she was worshiping God.
Ona byla svatou ženou ve Francii a asi se nepoužilo slovo oddanost, ale že nějakým způsobem uctívala Boha.
And then Prabhupada says, yes, if she is related with God, God consciousness, then Joan of Arc is also part of the Bhagavatam. So that got me thinking. What do we understand by Bhagavatam? So gradually, some idea came like this, that we have kind of four important categories of, let's say, components that have some sort of impact, some sort of relation to the Bhagavatam. We have on the left, we have non-Indic traditions, which we might say were non-existent in relation to the Bhagavatam before the Bhagavatam came to the West. Perhaps I should start on the body-centered Vedic corpus. So what we saw before, the four Vedas, the Brahmanas, the Upanishads, the Mahabharata, etc. And then on the top we have the commentarial tradition. And this is of course our acharyas, but it is also for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, we can read it as an extended commentary on the Bhagavad.
Samozřejmě komentáře Ačaryu, ale například Chaitanya Charitamritu, že můžeme vnímat jako rozšířený komentář Bhagavatam.
I'd like to say that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the perfect reader of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita is the story of his reading of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Chce říct, že Chaitanya Mahaprabhu je dokonalým čtenářem Srimad Bhagavatamu a Chaitanya Charitamrita je vlastně příběhem toho, jak on četl Srimad Bhagavatam.
And then on the right we have all of us, current readers. And we, when we read or when we hear, we are bringing something with us as we read and hear. The plot thickens. But specifically with current readers, we could consider cultural context that we bring with us when we read.
Takže to je právě rozlišené. Současní čtenáři znamená, že nás doplňuje kulturní kontext, který se postaví či čteme Bhagavata.
Which actually, of course, overlaps very deeply with historical context.
Což se samozřejmě hluboce překrývá s historickým kontextem.
And we might want to think about our individual psychophysical makeup.
Můžeme zamyslet nad naší osobní psychofyzickou kondicí.
And there's probably other things as well, whether we had breakfast or not.
Pak to můžeme ovlivňovat další věci, třeba jestli jsme snídali nebo ne.
Any number of things. But my point here is that we are bringing something to Bhagavatam as the Bhagavatam is coming to us.
Znamená, že si sami vnášíme do Bhagavatamu něco během toho, jak Bhagavatam k nám přichází.
Srila Prabhupada more than once encouraged us to discuss the Bhagavatam. He would use the phrase, from all angles of vision. So one thing I'm trying to suggest with this little diagram is there are a lot of different angles of vision. And as I said, there's a lot of what for most of us would be kind of hidden intertextuality. Actually, I meant to say about, again, Professor Thompson, his doctoral thesis was about the Bhagavatam, specifically about what he analyzes as the social context of the composition of the Bhagavatam. And one thing he does in his dissertation is identify many verses as being identical with or very similar to verses that are in the Manu Samhita.
Co tam vyzkoumal, že mnoho veršů je přímo stejných nebo velice podobných veršů z Manu Samhity.
So this is called intertextuality. There's, well, just to mention another example, the story in the 6th canto of Chitraketu and Vritrasura. I'm mean to say Indra, So one of the most celebrated narratives in the Rig Veda is Indra killing Vritrasura. But in the Rig Veda, the hero is invariably Indra. And of course, in the Bhagavatam, who is the actual hero of that encounter? It's Vritrasura. Yes. Come on, kill me. Let's get this over with. I want to go back to Gomber. So to know about this echo, you can say, with a significant difference from the Rig Veda, enriches our understanding of the Bhagavad. Okay, I was thinking again about the relation of the Bhagavatam to what I'll explain, the different elements. I came up also with this chart, this type.
Když jsem tak zamýšlel nad vztahy Bhagavata s různými elementy, tak jsem uspěl tady tomuhle diagramu.
Actually, I was inspired to sketch this out. I was attending a kind of introduction to Jainism.
Co mě dovedlo k tomuhle náčetku, bylo inspirace nějakým způsobem se zabývat šínismem.
And some of the students asked me, could I give them a little talk, a little explanation of Vaishnavism. So I thought, okay, how to do this in relation to Jainism, which I know very little about. Briefly, you see on the bottom, Veda as a totality of knowledge, and there's a line which is a wavy line, so it's supposed to represent an ocean, so the ocean of Vedic knowledge. And then emerging out of this ocean, there's two sort of semicircles going like this, one on the left, one on the right. The one on the left is labeled on the top left, Brahminical traditions, and the one on the right is labeled Shramanical or Shramanical traditions. Now, you know the word Brahminical, but what about Shramanical? Shram. What is that about? You know perhaps the verse, Shrama eva hi kevalam, any efforts of practicing varnashram and so on, if it's without attraction to the Lord, is Shrama eva hi kevalam. It's simply a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Znáte ten verš, kde je řečeno, že jakákoliv činnost, která nevzbuzuje zájem a přitažlivost Pánu, tak je jenom šrama, nebo je spousta krve, potu a slz.
So shamanical refers to ascetic traditions, traditions where asceticism is primary, one way to be there. And historically, there were many such groups that most of them kind of disappeared, and two of them have persisted to the present day. namely Jainism and Buddhism.
Takových tradic bylo hodně, které časem zanikaly, ale dodnes se uchovaly vězník, což je džínismus a buddhismus.
And so what I try to illustrate by this is that for the Vaishnavas, our central text is this Bhagavad Purana, and then we have two others, the Bhagavad Gita and the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and there's like a Venn diagram, there's some intertextuality, there's overlap of the scriptures.
A tady pro nás jsou důležité ty tři části Bhagavata Purana, Bhagavad Gita a v tom diagramu je znázorněné, jak jsou tam přesahy, které se překrývají.
And on the right side, written vertically, it says ascetic current, and on the left, bhakti current.
Napravo je napsáno asketický proud, vlevo je napsáno bhaktický proud.
So there's the image of an ocean, and then there's currents, and there's two prominent currents.
Máme výjev oceánu a dva proudy jsou hlavní, které zde tečou.
And what this amounts to in practice are two little words you might not be able to read because they're too small. To the right of Bhagavad Gita, it says ahimsa, and to the left it says yajna.
Co to znamená v praxi? Vidíte, dvěma výpisy, ale té Bhagavad Gita doprava směřuje ahimsa a doleva yajna.
Okay, what does this tell us? Well, again, we take the Bhagavatam as central.
Co nám to říká? Bhagavatam bereme jako centrum, centrální text.
And running through the Bhagavatam, there are currents.
Skrze ten Bhagavatam protékají proudy.
There's a strong Dharma current. I didn't show that here. But there is an ascetic current, and most importantly, we understand it's the bhakti current.
Je tam i dharmický proud, který tady neukazuje, je tam silný asketický proud, ale nejdůležitější pro nás je bhaktický proud.
Of course, we could argue, we might want to say, no, bhakti is right in the center.
Můžeme namítat, bhakti je prostřed, středem.
It's that which is generating the currents, if you like.
Můžeme říct, že to, co ty proudy vytváří.
Okay, so what, you may say? Well, again, we're talking about hermeneutics, so interpretation of Shastra. So what is Shastra? That's where we're coming from.
My se tady bavíme o hermeneutice, o výkladech interpretaci šáster, protože se zabýváme tím, co je šástra.
So all that was by way of step one, preparing to talk about hermeneutics. And specifically, what I'm doing is giving a very, very short introduction to the hermeneutics work that was done by the GBC Shastra Advisory Council over a period of years.
Co dal mě velice zajímavý stručný přehled práce týkající se hermeneutiky. Na tom se pracovalo po mnoho let a je na speciální šastrický výbor organizovaný GBC.
And I should say that very much of the credit for this work goes to our chairperson, Srimati Urmila Devi. She pushed this whole project forward, just not giving up over these years.
Velké zásluhy musím říct naše předsedkyně Urmila Devi, která ten projekt pořád tlačila po mnoho.
Because I'm a sort of advisory member of this council, she asked me one time, "Are you coming to our meeting in Houston?"
Já jsem takový poradní člen tohoto výboru, tak se někdo přijedeš na naše setkání do Houstonu.
And in April, and it was February, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be in China at that time."
Co se mělo odehrát v květnu, jsem je ptala v únoru a já jsem musel v té době v Číně.
And she said, "So what?
Říkám, no co?
You have to come."
Ah,
She's a hard person to say no.
Mně se těžko říká ne.
So I took an 11-hour flight from Beijing nonstop to Houston and spent the next 3 days of meetings with heavy jet lag.
Takže jsem pak absolvoval 11-hodinový let do Houstonu a celé mě tři probíhalo naše setkání, jsem měl český prostě 8 časový po dlouhém letu.
And then 13 hours back to Beijing.
Jsem se spál 13 hodin, bez přestupů, bez přestupů.
All right. Why hermeneutics? Why?
Proč se zabývat hermeneutikou?
Everything is clear. We have Bhagavad Gita as it is. It's clear, crystal clear, everything.
Je to všechno naprosto jasný, máme Bhagavad Gitu takovou, jaká je, to je křišťálově jasné.
Yes, absolutely clear, no doubt.
Ano, není pochyb, je to absolutně jasné.
And yet, what do we find? We find devotees sometimes quite intensely arguing with each other over an interpretation of something in the Shastra.
Přesto se setkáváme s tím, jak podání velice vedou hodně intenzivní výkladné debaty ohledně toho, jak chápat věci šastra.
And sometimes controversies persist over a long time.
Bývají kontroverze dlouhé trvá.
Does anyone want to mention some controversy that's been going on for some time in our society that may have something to do with Shastra?
Co se týče šastra, například naší společnosti.
That's the first one. Indeed, yes. I know you're going to want me to give some solution from hermeneutics Shastra. What I'll say in advance is this whole program is not sort of free. It doesn't function in such a way that you just start at square one and you will invariably come to square 10 with the same conclusion.
Takže mě budete chtít jasný závěr z hlediska hermeneutiky a šastrické teorie. Musím zvažovat, že tohle to není, že bychom měli dojít z čtveríčku číslo 1, číslo 10, jestli je jasný závěr.
It is not what we used to have as children, paint by numbers, you know, this paint.
Nejsou ty spojovačky, co jsme měli jako děti, že jsme mohli chápat.
But this came to the GDC because certain issues came up persistently and questions came up. How do we go about in a thoughtful way to take guidance from Shastra?
Tady jsme vytrvali 20 tyhle ty otázky, tam rozešli to společně na úroveň GBC a tím rozumným způsobem vycházeli z šastra a měli nějakou cestu, jak je to.
In traditional Vaishnava culture, this issue would generally not come up, would not arise. Would not
Tradiční vašnovské kultuře by se takové problémy nevyřešily.
But we have a unique situation. We have an international system. It would not come up. Why? Because the guru would simply say, it is like this. And that would be okay if we only had one guru, which was the situation as long as Srila Prabhupada was present.
Což byla situace
But now we have approximately 100 gurus in Islam. It's a very tiny number. That's another topic. Why do we have so few gurus? But it just takes two gurus to tango. I mean, to disagree. I mean, what do I mean? Yeah, so we have this unique situation where we want to come to common agreement on important matters for the society. So we identified three spheres where hermeneutics would be important. One is for our personal selves, for our own culture of Krishna Bhakti. One is for the mission, for spreading Krishna consciousness. What is it that we are telling people? Are we all, as we say, on the same page?
Druhá věc je naše mise prezentování vědomí Krišny společnosti. Shodujeme se na tom, jsme na stejné stránce k tomu, co představujeme.
And one is for within the institution as an organization for matters possibly of management, just getting things done.
Sféra důležitosti je v rámci společnosti, co se týče
And we might want to add within that category what has come to be called devotee care. Anyway, that's another topic. Why do we have to talk about devotee care? That should be natural, right? We have to have a ministry and So some sort of process is desirable to especially to resolve what may appear as contradictions within Shastra.
Žádoucí mít nějaký proces, jak rozhodnout, vyřešit nějaké kontradikce, rozporné věci v šastrách.
Okay, here's a little dictionary definition of hermeneutics. The branch of knowledge that deals with interpretation, especially of the Bible or literary texts.
Slovník definuje hermeneutiku jako oblast poznání, která se zabývá interpretací, zvlášť konkrétně výkladem literárních textů.
So it's generally around, hermeneutics generally has to do with written texts.
Obvykle se hermeneutika zabývá psanými texty.
But one thing that we recognized in the Shastra advisor was we need to acknowledge three components of Shastra.
K čemu jsme dospěli v tom šastrickém výboru, že musíme si na vědomí 3 komponenty šastra.
Or to use the term Shastra in a broad sense, namely sadhu, Shastra, and guru.
Budeme zabývat se šastrou v 3 oblastech, to znamená sadhu, šastra a guru.
So although it says here it's traditionally about biblical interpretation and so on, we're taking it in a broader sense.
Když tady je ta definice interpretace tuhle, ale potom přistupujeme v širším smyslu.
Now there's something here, something which I don't really discuss here, but what we are interested in could be seen as a practice within one of three types of hermeneutics.
Takže co z toho budu rozebírat, je, že můžeme se dívat na to, co chápeme v rámci tří druhů hermeneutiky.
There's the hermeneutics of consent.
Hermeneutika souhlasu,
There's the hermeneutics of,
hermeneutika podezření,
and there's integrative hermeneutics.
integrativní hermeneutika.
So what we kind of the unspoken assumption of all that we are doing when we're talking about hermeneutics is that we are doing hermeneutics of consent.
Takže co je nevyřešený předpoklad, že my tady děláme hermeneutiku souhlasu.
The sort of opposite of that is hermeneutics of suspicion. The hermeneutics of suspicion basically starts out from being suspicious that whatever is written is really saying what it seems to be saying. That's hidden between the lines and behind, so to say, behind the text. There is some power play going on for manipulating us. So the masters of the hermeneutics of suspicion have been identified. Srila Prabhupada doesn't use that term, but Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Sigmund Freud. All three are German-speaking. I don't know if that means anything, but we just had, just a few days ago, we had Jagannath Rath Yatra in the city of Trier in sort of Western Germany. That's where Karl Marx was born. We were happy to be purifying. Anyway, Karl meant well. But I think that's another topic. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, we need to see what Srila Prabhupada meant by the word interpretation or interpreting. So in one discussion, 1976, one guest says, Swamiji, you have also given so much something. That is interpretation. And Srila Prabhupada says, no, that is not interpretation. That is explanation. Interpretation, if I change Kurukshetra into something else, that is interpretation. So, very often, Srila Prabhupada will use the word interpretation in a negative sense. It's something we don't do. But he doesn't always take it that way.
ale nebylo to tak vždycky.
This is a bit longer quote. The points of Bhagavad Gita, though they are simply complete, can be understood from unlimited angles of vision. So our philosophy is not right, like mental speculation. The proper function of the brain or psychological activities is to understand everything through Krishna's perspective or point of view. And so there is no limit to that understanding because Krishna is unlimited. And even though it can be said that the devotee who knows Krishna, he knows everything, still the philosophical process never stops and the devotee continues to increase his knowledge even though he knows everything. Try to understand this point.
Další citát, kolik Bhagavad-gíty jsou sice jednoduché a úplné, ale dají se chápat s neomezeným mnoha úhlů pohledu. Takže naše filozofie není suchá, společná komentální spekulace. A správnou funkcí mozku nebo psychologických činností je chápat všechno z Krišnovy perspektivy, Krišnového hlediska. A jelikož Krišna sám je neomezený, tak není pro toho, který neexistují meze. I když se dá říct, že oddaný, který zná Krišnu, zná všechno, tak přesto filozofický proces nikdy nekončí a oddaný dál rozšíří své poznání, přestože už všechno ví. Snažte se to pochopit.
So, Prabhupada doesn't use the word interpretation in this book, but he does speak of understanding from unlimited angles of vision. And basically, we can say he's speaking here of the unlimited depth of Shastra. However deep you go in Shastra, you can go deeper. More quotes. In the spiritual society, no sect or sampradaya is considered as bona fide party who has no authorized interpretation of the Brahma Sutras.
Duchovní společnosti není žádná sekta nebo standarda považována za autorizovanou věrohodnou, pokud nemá vlastně autorizované výklady interpretace hlasu.
So this and the next two quotes are giving a positive sense of interpretation.
Další dva citáty dávají pozitivní interpretaci.
Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has explained these words in a very interesting way as they can be interpreted from the side of Saraswati, the mother of learning.
Krišna Kšétra Thakur tato slova vysvětlil velice zajímavým způsobem, jak je možné je interpretovat z podání matky učenosti Saraswati.
And then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur interprets this verse in the Vedanta Madhava in two ways, for Lord Krishna and for Srimati Radharani. When interpreted for Krishna, the night is understood to have been a dark moon night, and when interpreted for Srimati Radharani, it is considered to have been a full moon.
Další je, že Bhaktivinoda Thakur interpretuje tento verš Madhavy dvěma způsoby. Pro Pána Krišnu a pro Srimati Radharani. V rámci interpretace pro Krišnu je noc chápána jako svítí a pro Srimati Radharani jako svítí plný.
This last quote, of course, is referring to the Rupa Goswami's Vedanta Madhava, which is, but it's also poetry.
To se vztahuje na komentář další Madhavy, což je drama, ale i jako poezie.
And poetry, what makes poetry poetry is its richness of, we could say, implication or suggestion.
Co z poezie dělá poezii je bohatství, jak jaká je bohatá možnost úsledků, které všechno to může nás člověka znamenat.
But it turns out that the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, minus some chapters in Canto 5, in terms of verse poetry, are poetry. Is poetry.
Většina veršů Srimad Bhagavatam, kromě pátém zpěvu, je to prozaicky psáno, tak jsou to poezie, jsou to verši.
It's now 12:15.
Už máme čtvrtné jedno.
Okay, just brief.
To ve stručnosti
So, one of the members of the Shastra Advisory Council is Hari Harsha from Mumbai, and I think of him as walking Shastra. He's an encyclopedia of Shastra knowledge. He's quite astonishing.
jedním z členů šastrického výboru je Hari Harsha Prabhu z Bombay, který pokládám za chodící encyklopedii, který je vlastní šastry jsou podívaný.
Yeah, that's another. So he explains in this context of Prabhupada's meaning of interpretations. He says, the reason for Srila Prabhupada's disproving Gandhi's allegorical interpretation, but supporting and rephrasing Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's allegorical interpretation, is that Gandhi flattens the entire meaning of the verse exclusively to the allegorical plane when he says that, quote, the Gita is not a historical discourse. On the other hand, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, his intention is not to flatten the entire meaning of the verse exclusively into the allegorical dimension.
Neuznává Gandhiho alegorickou interpretaci, si to podporuje a parafrázuje alegorickou interpretaci Šrila Vishwanatha Chakravartiho Thakura. Tím důvodem je, že Gandhi složek, který tam verše, že to má jiný význam než ten alegorický. Když říká, že Gita není historický rozhovor. Protože Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur nemá zájem nebo není cílem zpošťovat význam verše jenom těch alegorických.
Yeah, this is just a little extract out of what Hari Harsha explains, but I thought it's telling. I like how he makes this distinction. Interpretation. Apparently, there were two allegorical interpretations. One of them, from Vishwanath Chakravarti, is expanding the meaning. The other, from Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, was flattening the meaning.
Takže tady je malá ukázka z celé té práce a my se vidí právě tohoto srovnání, že Vishwanath Chakravarti obohacuje, rozšiřuje ten význam verši svou interpretací, když to Mohandas Gandhi naopak ten verš poškoval a vybíral význam.
I think I'll stop here and see if there are any questions briefly, because continue.
Tady skončím nějaké stručné otázky a pokračovat můžeme zítra.
Vlastně rozumím o tom, co je ta interpretace a co se tady vlastně správně.
He's wondering what is actually interpretation and what is explanation and which of the two is right.
Well, Srila Prabhupada made at one time this distinction of interpretation versus explanation.
Je příjemné příležitosti, že pravda ukázala ten rozdíl mezi interpretací a vysvětlením.
Because he generally had a quite negative understanding, but sometimes even in the same sentence, he'll speak of misinterpretation and then interpretation.
Že obecně to dalo jako interpretaci jako negativní věc, ale tam taky máme příklad, kde stejné věty budí misinterpretaci nebo špatné interpretaci, to je správné.
But hermeneutics is about interpretation. We're saying that we cannot avoid the practice of interpretation. As soon as we drive a car and stop at a stop signal where the signal is showing red, we are making an interpretation that means I should stop.
Se zabýváme hermeneutikou, můžeme se bez ní udejít, správně rozumět věci, jako když vidíme auto a zastavíme na červenou, tak vidíme červené světlo, znamená, musíme to interpretovat, že musíme zastavit.
As soon as I speak a sentence in English and when the Prabhu translates it into Czech, he is interpreting what I just in
Já interpretuji v češtině, co Maharaj řekl anglicky.
So interpretation is, you could say, quite fundamental to deriving meaning.
Můžeme říct, že interpretace má základní význam pro vyvozování, pro chápání smyslu.
Without that process, it's just so much squiggles on a page. We're talking about just some marks on a page, meaningless.
Jinak, pokud bychom neměli tohle umění výkladu, budeme mít na straně nějakého dostane nějaká písmenka, nějaká smyslná sdělení.
And the nature of the written word especially is that it is subject to different interpretations. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato, he wrote very negatively about writing. He said writing is a problem, but there's a bit of a paradox because he wrote that. And of course, Srila Prabhupada wrote his books. Actually, most of his books he did not write, he spoke. Which is another topic. It's, but we won't go into that now. But,
if I can, from the previous indoctrination class.
Oh.
So the question is that Prabhupada says that whatever comes from the Vedas is something which should not be questioned. It looks like that terms like indoctrination.
Yeah.
And the thing is like cow stool is pure, and of course other stool is impure. Yeah. And this is something which cannot be questioned.
Right.
So it looks like we have some things in our tradition which look like indoctrination. Like in Christianity, they have this Holy Spirit, Father and Son. It's not questionable, at least at their doctrine. And they have others also which cannot even touch with philosophy or examination. So does the indoctrination has a place in a proper view in this whole system of explanation? And how can we defend it also towards those who are actually questioning everything?
That is a very good question. Yes.
Já jsem se ptal, že v naší tradici máme zdánlivě indoktrinaci, to znamená tvrzení šástek, který nemůžeme zpochybňovat, jako Prabhupád říkal ohledně kravého trusu, že je čistý, šástra říká, a ostatní trus je nečistý. Takže v tomto kontextu to zní jako indoktrinace, jako něco, co se nemůže zpochybňovat, a v křesťanské tradici mají svatého Otce, Syna a tak dále, který nemůžeme o tom diskutovat a je to tak, jak je to daný. Takže jakým způsobem vysvětlit určitý takovéto věci, které jsou řečeny Prabhupádou, který zní a vypadají jako právě ta indoktrinace.
The $64,000 question. So, very briefly, it's you're bringing in the question of skepticism, and there's different degrees of skepticism. And I mentioned that ours is a hermeneutics of consent. And we could say that it begins with the 10 principles identified by Srimad Thakur, 9 of which were identified prior to him by Magda in the Magda Sampradaya. Let's see if I remember. Amnaya Praha Tatvam Harinita Paramam Sarva Shaktim Rasatim Tatvinam Samstajivan Prakriti Kavalitan Tatvimam Muktam Stabhavat Veda Veda Prakasham Sapalamati Hare Sadhanam Shudhavaktim Sadyam Tapriti Etyak Upadishati Janan Gaurachandra Swayam Saha. That summarizes our theology in 4 lines, 10 points. Hari is the part of reality, and the living entity is simultaneously one and different from the Lord. And the process of realizing the truth is Shuddha Bhakti. And the goal is Priti, Satya. And Rasa is the experience. So like that. Now you mentioned in the Christian tradition they have fundamental doctrines. But there's no end to the theological discourse within Christianity just on the doctrine of the Trinity. There's I don't know, probably hundreds, if not thousands, of books discussing what do we mean by it.
Zároveň třeba to jedinosti Boha se vedou nekonečné debaty a jsou stovky, ne tisíce knih, které se zabývají, co tím vlastně myslíme.
So there's plenty of space, even there we have foundational principles. There's plenty of space for exploring the depth of.
Když máme nějaké základní principy, tak je tady ještě nekonečný prostor, jak je svoboda hlouč.
And that is encouraged, I would argue, in our tradition.
Já budu říct, že tohle je v naší tradici podporované a oceňované.
So when Srila Prabhupada says what's stated in the Veda must be accepted, yes, we accept. Now, how do we accept? What does it mean to us? What does that acceptance mean? What are the implications? And so on.
Prabhupada řekne, musíme přijmout to, co je řečeno ve Védách. Ano, to přijímáme a teď třetí je měl, jak to správně chápat, jak je z toho plynul důsledek.
And speaking of skepticism, there are limits to how skeptical you can be to get out of bed in the morning.
Má svoje mezi, jak budeš hodně skeptický, abys zároveň se nebál vstát ráno z postele.
Radical skepticism is the business of the charvaks. Charvak Muni.
Radikální skepticismus je, čím se zabývají čárvákové.
And on that note, we can end for today. Thank you all so much. Please feel free to come tomorrow for our second session on the subject. And I'll take more time for discussion.
Zdravím se přímící přátelé, druhý hermeneutika, pokusím se nechat více prostoru pro diskuzi.
Nita Gaur Premanande Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai.